Welcome to the Sourcing Hero podcast, produced by Una, a group purchasing organization that empowers sourcing heroes, and Art of Procurement, the world's largest procurement podcast network. I'm your host, Kelly Barner. The goal of the Sourcing Hero podcast is to capture the epic stories of people who are rising up and beating the odds to create exceptional value within procurement, directly from those heroes themselves. Today, my guest here on the Sourcing Hero podcast is Chad Gaydos. Chad is the CEO of Procurify, an AI-enhanced procurement and AP automation platform created for the mid-market. Hi, Chad. Thank you so much for being with me today.
Kelly, it is a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I shared in my intro what you do, but let's take a minute to learn a little bit more about how you got here. What's it interesting or helpful for people to know about your professional background?
Well, I actually had an incredible blessing back in the 90s after I graduated college with my undergraduate being in business and finance and accounting. I found my way to a company called SAP. So at SAP, I got my entry into software. It was amazing. I learned how to implement the different financial applications for SAP. But the very first process that I worked on at SAP was procurement. And so it was a really interesting journey for me because not only did I have a blessing of working across the many different industries, learning about customers that are big and small, how to make them successful with software, but I actually learned procurement first. So it was so cool to learn about the intersection of finance and operations and how a company spends money. And I learned about that the very first thing at SAP. And so it's a full circle moment for me, Kelly, now being the CEO of Procurify, where we work with mid-market organizations and, the dynamics to give them a solution of visibility and control around spend. And so it's a really exciting time. But yeah, that's kind of been my journey working in software over almost the past 30 years.
Well, Chad, I don't know if you're an Eagles fan or not. So I would say procurement's a lot like the Hotel California. You can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave. It's amazing how many people, they think those roads are leading out of procurement and they loop just around the bend and bring them back in. Now, speaking about interesting times, at this moment in procurement, I think especially for mid-market companies, we have amazing evolution happening on the SaaS side of things with great progress around user experience and interface. But then, of course, we have AI hitting everything. What are you seeing right now in terms of how those two, let's call them digital capabilities, are coming together and how they're affecting the mid-market finance and procurement teams that you're talking to?
Right. It's one of the most exciting times now in this collision of AI and SaaS coming together. The way that I would describe it is really the last 15 years of SaaS has been more focused on digitizing workflows, looking at moving processes out of spreadsheets and email into a system of record. And so the really exciting part is AI changes that equation because software is no longer just recording activity. It's beginning to interpret and recommend actions, right? The reasoning that you see, the wave of the last several years with LLMs and the reasoning that comes with that. So in procurement, that means moving from tracking spend to understanding spend and to eventually getting better decision support on that spend and what you do with that money. So mid-market companies, it's a really big shift because they typically don't have large analytics teams.
Yeah.
They rely on insights that they can get through the system, but AI can effectively be a layer of intelligence that they just haven't had before.
And the thing that's interesting, procurement has been, I won't say purely digital because we have all kinds of other things we use, but procurement, I think, has been very easily engaged in digital for a very long time. And yet right now, to me, this moment feels different. I think maybe partially because solutions that are available to lots of companies that in the past would have only been available to the very largest enterprise companies. Are you also getting the sense that this particular moment in procurement's digital evolution is sort of different from some of the progress we've made in the past?
Yeah, it really is because when you think about what's different from in the past, it really is that practicality of what's now available. And we've had these waves in technology. So technology waves that I've been through around efficiency, for example, ERP systems, they digitize finance. And if you think about SaaS made it easier to deploy, like simplified deployment, usability.
Yes.
AI is fundamentally different because this decision support ability now comes to everybody. So software is starting to interpret context, and in procurement, it can read invoices, it can analyze patterns in spending, detect risks, it can give recommendations.
Mm.
But the speed of innovation that I've seen, especially over the last couple of years, it's unprecedented. What used to take years in terms of product development now can come out in months, and it's enormous opportunity, but also uncertainty, which many leaders are excited about and cautious at the same time.
Well, and to that point of being cautious, I know you and the team at Procurify did a little bit of research, maybe to understand where everybody's mind is, how the extent to which everyone is embracing all these new capabilities. And you found, I want to get my numbers right here, that 37% of organizations are using AI for spend visibility, but only 30% of those organizations actually trust the outputs.
Right.
So it's interesting. People are moving ahead, but they're not sure yet that they can trust these results. Where do you think that trust gap is coming from?
I think it comes down to trust always lags technology adoption. And if you think about it, organizations will experience AI. They'll do it quickly because the potential value is so obvious, and what we're seeing, occur right now in the market validates that, right? But trusting AI to influence financial decisions, that's a whole different threshold. And so finance leaders, they're accountable for accuracy, they're accountable for compliance and auditability. They can't rely on a black box. That's why you got to be able to explain it, and that's why governance matters so much. Companies have to understand how AI arrived at an answer, not just that it arrived at an answer. So over time, trust will build the same way it did with cloud computing, as an example. But it takes experience and it takes proof.
It absolutely does. And I think one of the other things that we're seeing, and you mentioned sort of process or workflow oriented software. I think one of the things that we're seeing in a lot of the conversations that involve that is that we talk about procurement, sometimes meaning the function, sometimes meaning people. Sometimes you have the procurement function without having people dedicated to those tasks. So you might have a chief financial officer, a controller, VP of finance, the people on their teams that are actually owning the processes that we would think of as traditionally being within procurement scope. How do some of those cases where you still have the procurement activity and the need for the procurement data, but not necessarily dedicated procurement headcount, how are you seeing that open a door for AI opportunities?
Well, in procurement, so procurement teams, they understand the potential immediately because the workload is so heavy. So if you think about the sheer volume of invoices, contracts, suppliers, and approvals all day long, right? It's just a load of information. So when you think about their approach to addressing this with AI now, or how their roles interact with it, the same time, they've got to be cognizant of the risk responsibility for the organization. So if something
Absolutely.
goes wrong, yeah, it impacts compliance and vendors and financial reporting. So you have this interesting dynamic where procurement leaders, they're excited about automation, but they want strong guardrails around it. So it's a balance that's very healthy. I think it forces vendors and organizations to implement AI responsibly rather than recklessly.
Yeah. Now, when we talk about that risk responsibility, I think that brings us back around to governance. Maybe not the most fun topic in the universe, but something that procurement is always coming back to. Are there some practical ways that mid-market organizations can start building both the infrastructure and also that governance component so that they can truly trust those AI-enabled spend insights?
Right. I think there's really three practical steps to building that trust. The first is you're going to start with narrow use cases where the outcome is measurable. So, for example, an invoice capture or a spend classification. I think the second thing is you've got to ensure transparency. So, leaders should be able to see how AI arrived at a recommendation
Yeah.
and understand it. The third would be around human oversight. So AI should augment decision making, not replace accountability. So when organizations take this approach, adoption grows, that trust grows naturally. But you definitely need to have those steps in place.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it comes from procurement's enthusiasm, or the enthusiasm of the team that has responsibility for procurement. But there's also growing pressure from boards and CEOs to use AI, but very generally. So it's one thing to say we need an AI strategy or we want to incorporate AI in our workflows. It's another to give people driving specifics that demonstrate what that should look like when the work is done. How do you suggest that finance and procurement leaders respond to these requests to incorporate AI?
That's a really good question because I think if you look at the pressure that boards really are pushing down on organizations now, and you can see it with what's happening with IT budgets, which are growing 7% a year versus AI budgets that are growing 100% a year. They want to know how you're using it. But the worst thing organizations can do is adopt AI as a buzzword. Instead, leaders should focus on business outcomes first and then ask where can AI meaningfully
Yeah.
help improve those outcomes. In procurement, those outcomes are usually around visibility, compliance, cost control. And if AI improves those, then it's worth deploying. If it doesn't, then it's an experiment, not a strategy.
And not all companies are going to do an equally good job with this, right? Some people are going to fall victim to sort of shiny toy syndrome, right? And go with it, as you said, as a buzzword. Others will give it real thought and they will have desired outcomes and they'll have structured ROI measurements that they're going to use. So I think just like any other technology, AI is both creating winners and losers. In many cases, more based on the approach of the company necessarily than even the technology being chosen. Um, but if you had to think about some of the teams that you've worked with, what would you say differentiates the organization that position themselves to successfully incorporate AI versus those that either have sort of a false start because of the shiny toy thing or simply get left behind because they're just not sure when it's the right time for them to move?
Yeah, it's the difference between the winners and the losers. The winners are going to be organizations that treat AI as a capability, not as a feature. I think they're going to invest in clean data, in clean processes and governance. They experiment early, but they have to scale it thoughtfully. Now, the organizations that struggle they'll chase technology without changing how they operate. But AI doesn't magically fix broken processes.
Yeah.
It's going to amplify whatever system already exists.
Absolutely. Okay, Chad, now I have a real challenge for you. Things
Mm,
have been changing so fast, but I'm going to ask you to look forward a little bit.
yeah.
So we know that the technology is continuing to change, but procurement is continuing to change, whether that's workflows or people. When you look forward, let's say 3 or 5 years out, we see or we assume that AI is going to handle more and more operational work. How do you think our teams are going to change in response to that?
This is probably one of the most important questions right now. And everybody is trying to predict, for example, how does AI replace or replicate or improve, for example, in our business SaaS software?
Yeah.
I think AI will handle more of the operational work that historically has consumed procurement teams. I really do. So I think the things that we talked about, the data entry, the invoice processing, the policy checks, but I don't think it's going to eliminate procurement roles. I think it's going to elevate them. I think procurement professionals are going to spend more time or have more time to spend on supplier strategy, risk management, cross-functional collaboration, and even working through operations and finance, right? Different things that are needed. So the role is going to shift from process manager to more of a strategic advisor. And in many ways, AI is going to allow procurement to finally operate at the level the business always expected it to.
Well, and I think it's interesting too, because this goes back to your point earlier about data cleanliness and trust and understanding where the answer came from, not just that the answer is 5 or 15 or whatever it happens to be. It's like as the AI or the AI enabled technology evolves, the better job we do understanding it as it goes, the more and more complex or strategic, as you put it, projects and tasks we're going to be able to bring it to bear on, which really opens the door for procurement to get involved in so much more.
Right.
So to your point, it's not about replacing people. It's about get some of this tactical stuff or the foundational strategic work, and then hand it to me as an experienced category professional, and let me really expand the impact that I can have in the business.
I love it. Yes, I agree completely.
So Chad, before we wrap our conversation, we actually have a tradition here at the Sourcing Hero podcast that I want to bring you in on. I'm going to give you 2 questions. You can pick either one, and any answer that you give me is the right answer for you. So your choices are, what does the idea of a sourcing hero mean to you? Or if you want to look at this a little bit more broadly, what do you think heroism looks like in a business context?
Let's go with the first, but I actually think it somewhat answers both, right? In that I love the topic and I have passion around this category, and so I think of a sourcing hero as someone who drives meaningful change in the organization. In procurement, that often means challenging status quo. So you've got to introduce new ways to manage spend, improve transparency, build stronger supplier relationships, as an example. But today, that heroism increasingly involves embracing AI responsibly. That takes courage. One of the values that I talk about at a leadership level at Procurify, and what I elevate just in terms of our employees, is I want them to be risk takers, to have courage, to speak up in a meeting, to bring an idea, right? A lot of times it requires a little bit of courage to put that forward.
True.
And so I think of that, and the leaders who lean into transformation while protecting the organization from risk is going to shape the future of procurement. And I think those people are heroes.
And to your point about courage, I think especially as we try to learn new technologies, it takes courage to raise your hand and say, I don't understand how this works, or I don't understand how you got to 5, right? And I don't see where that answer came from. But if we don't ask those questions, we really do risk ending up in the wrong place.
Right. Agree.
Well, Chad, incredibly interesting, actually really inspiring perspective on AI. Sometimes you get sort of like the dystopian, AI is here perspective. But I feel really enthused about the opportunity to apply AI, to bring it into procurement's work, and to allow it to give us the opportunity to elevate our impact. If people are meeting you or hearing about Procurify for the first time through this conversation, how would you recommend that they reach out and get in touch with you?
Oh, I would say just go to our LinkedIn or my LinkedIn page individually. Shoot me a quick message on that. I can direct you to any support you might need in the organization to find out more about Procurify. And you can also look at our Procurify LinkedIn page, which has our website. And so I think that's probably the easiest for the listeners here.
Awesome. Chad, thank you so much for being here today, for sharing your perspective, and to give us all something to look forward to in terms of the next phase of digital procurement.
Kelly, it was an honor to spend this time with you. And I want to thank the listeners for listening. And yes, encourage them to reach out as they have questions.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Sourcing Hero podcast. Join us again next time for more true stories of sourcing and business heroism performed by your colleagues and peers. Look for the Sourcing Hero wherever you get your podcasts, and don't forget to subscribe. Finally, don't forget, sourcing heroism is taking place all around us every day. Keep your eyes open and you're bound to see it. Until next time, I'm your host, Kelly Barner. Stay well, and always remember that you can be a hero too.